Chapter 10. Friday afternoon. Well, you're here early, becoming a regular gym rat, aren't you? Kat smiled at Brian. While she didn't mind becoming a gym rat, she was really here early because she couldn't stand sitting at home any longer. The suspension was killing her, as was the waiting game her supervisor was playing with her. The board was still discussing, he'd said in his latest email. But Kat was pretty sure he knew the outcome and was simply stringing her along a little longer because he could. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you have a lot of time on your hands. He tilted his head at her. Time? Are you a teacher, off for the summer? Kat chuckled. No, I'm an oncologist, but She stopped herself. Somehow she felt that sharing why she had so much time would set Brian back instead of pushing him closer to God. The light still hadn't left him entirely. I'm in between cases, she finished, hoping he wouldn't call her on the fib. Well, it's good to have downtime, he said. I could use some of that myself. Indeed. Kat flashed a small smile and then nodded toward the locker room. Guess I'll go and get changed. Brian flashed her a wave and then reached for the phone, which had just begun to ring. Kat continued her trek around the bags, but she was stopped again before she made it to the locker room. Kat, you have a minute. She backed up and poked her head into the weight room. Jason stood facing her, his weight shifting from one foot to the other. Sure, Jason, what's up? I wanted to thank you for what you said the other day. Of course, you're welcome. She smiled at him and turned to leave, but his hand caught her arm and stilled her. Slowly, she turned back to face him, both excited and scared of what he was about to say. No one has believed in me in a long time. In fact, I'm not even sure I've believed in myself lately. But your words hit me. He paused, and Kat could see his Adam's apple bob in his throat. Anyway, I wanted to see if you might like to have lunch with me tomorrow. His insecurity swam in his eyes, and Kat wanted to say yes, not only for him, but for herself as well. She knew her time on Earth was limited, but Jason was someone she was supposed to reach anyway, and she was losing her mind sitting at home. However, would she push him farther from God if she said yes? But then decided it wouldn't work? Or worse, if the rapture happened and she disappeared on him? Kat bit her lip as she thought of how to answer. There were pros and cons to both answers. It was just lunch, and she could use the time to share with him. Okay, lunch. They were just 2 words, but Kat felt like a lot hinged on those 2 words. She just wasn't sure if it was a lot of good or a lot of bad. Raven scanned the gym for Kat as she stepped through the front glass door. She'd seen the girl's Mini Cooper outside, and she was determined to get some answers. Kat was either a liar or a witch, and Raven was going to find out which. Brian flashed her a wave as she passed his desk, but she was too focused on her mission to respond. A few other guys were in the gym early, hitting bags or running on the treadmill, but besides them, the gym was quiet. This was normally her favorite time to come, not only because it was before the place filled with noise and the smell of sweat, but also because it was the best time to catch Jason alone. Jason. Interesting that she didn't see him. Normally, by this time, he would be wiping down the bags or vacuuming the floor, but he was nowhere in sight. Had he taken a day off? She knew he did that occasionally, normally when he drank too much the night before and was suffering from a hangover, but he'd seemed in high spirits yesterday. She poked her head into the weight room as she passed. Jason was at the bench press again, focused on the bar he held in his hands. Raven wanted to stay and watch his muscles flex, but he was not her primary goal right now. She needed to find Kat. Raven continued to the locker room, and there she found Kat pulling gym clothes out of her bag. We need to talk. Kat looked up, surprise covering her face. Okay, about what? There was hesitation in her voice, but she set down her clothes and waited for Raven to continue. About what you said, about my future. Kat's eyes shifted to the doorway. Are you sure you want to have this conversation here? What I have to tell you is going to sound a little crazy. Here is as good a place as any. I'm not going anywhere with you until I know what's going on. Kat sighed and patted the bench next to her. You better sit down then. Though Raven was hesitant to get too close to Kat in case she was a witch, She sat down on the bench and waited for the girl to begin. Kat tapped her lip for a moment as if debating how to begin. Then she took a deep breath and opened her mouth. I told you the other day that I began coming in after my friend died. I was angry and I didn't know how to channel that anger, but I also thought I was going crazy. Though she didn't want to, Raven could empathize with Kat. She hadn't lost a best friend. She wasn't sure she'd ever really had one. But she remembered feeling like she was going crazy when her world turned upside down at the tender age of 12. I started seeing lights around people. Not everyone, but enough that I couldn't dismiss it as hallucinations. A vice began to squeeze on Raven's lungs. Kat saw things too? Kat paused and licked her lips. I didn't know what the lights were, so I tried to ignore them. But then I began having dreams of my best friend telling me that I needed to listen. I didn't know what she meant, but then a girl from Texas showed up and told me God had sent her to help me understand my gift. Crazy wasn't the word Raven would have chosen for the words coming out of Kat's mouth. Crazy would barely scratch the surface, but she forced her jaw shut to let Kat continue. Jordan, that was the girl, arriving really shook me up, and I confided in my mother, who then told me that I used to see Jesus and talk to him when I was little. A small snort escaped Raven's lips, and she shook her head. This was too much. I'm sorry. You saw Jesus. I don't believe in Jesus. Kat was either battier than an old cat lady or on drugs. Raven just wasn't sure which. I know. Kat stared at her with an intensity that immediately dried up Raven's scoffing. I wasn't sure I believed my mother either. I certainly had no memory of seeing Jesus. But then an angel appeared to me, and it grew pretty hard to deny. Drugs were definitely taking the lead. Raven didn't think crazy cat ladies even went this far off the reservation. An angel appeared to you. Did she float down on a cloud and play a harp? Or did she look like Roma Downey? Raven couldn't believe she was giving any time to this nonsense. No, he didn't. Kat seemed unfazed by Raven's ridicule, which unnerved her. He came into my office and unfurled his wings, glowing brighter than anything I'd ever seen. He told me the lights I see are people who are being protected by angels while they decide to follow Jesus or not. Really? So you just see angels sitting on people's shoulders? Do you see the devils too? Condescension dripped from Raven's voice. This was worse than some hokey after-school special, and she was determined to get a rise out of Kat. Her calm demeanor was unnatural. No, I don't see devils, but I think you might see demons. Kat's serious tone wiped the smile from Raven's face. What do you mean? Images of the dark shapes she'd been seeing the last few days assaulted her mind, and she shook her head to clear them. I don't believe in demons, so how could I see them? I know you saw something the other day, Raven, something that scared you. Now, I was afraid when I first saw the lights, but I was scared because I thought I was going crazy, not because the lights themselves frightened me. Raven's defensive shield kicked into place. You don't know what you're talking about. I know the angel, Micah, said I had to find you. I don't know why, but he said you were important in the next phase. Micah? Had she just said Micah? Could it be the same mysterious Micah Raven had met? No, that would be impossible. There was no way she had spoken with an angel. Besides, Micah was a common name. She decided to let it go and focus on the last comment. What next phase? Kat rubbed the back of her neck and let out a long, slow breath. I don't know for sure. He didn't tell me. But what he did say was that the rapture was going to come soon, and you would be important after we were gone. Raven's brow lifted. Gone? What do you mean, gone? When the rapture happens, Raven, all believers in Christ will disappear. At least that's the accepted theory. Some believe we may leave behind clothes or disappear completely. Either way, I believe we will be gone, and half the population will be left wondering what happened to us. After that, the tribulation begins, and it isn't pretty according to the Bible. Raven's dream flashed into her mind. The child disappearing in her hands, all the kids in the gym being gone, the driver who said no one was in the car coming at him, Could all this be true? Her head spun as she tried to make sense of it. She didn't believe in God, didn't believe in angels or demons. She believed in monsters. There'd been enough of those in her life. But they were human monsters, nothing supernatural. I know it's a lot to take in. It was for me too. But I'm supposed to help you, Raven. The pleading in Kat's voice interrupted her inner turmoil, and she stared into her eyes. What if I don't want your help? Kat sighed as she changed back into street clothes after her workout. She'd thought there'd been a moment when she had been reaching Raven, when maybe the girl was opening up and listening, but then she'd shut down again. What if I don't want your help? Kat hadn't known what to say when Raven had posed that question. Of course, she couldn't make Raven do anything. All she could do was give her the information and be there to answer any questions she might have. But Micah had said this was her job, and since she was still on suspension, it was the only job she seemed to have at the moment. She felt like she was failing miserably. Raven hadn't spoken to her after that, hadn't even looked at her, but Kat could feel the negative energy radiating her direction from the girl. She didn't know what it was going to take to reach her. Hoisting her bag on her shoulder, she exited the locker room, waving to Jason as she left. He still had the light on his shoulder too, but she'd received no more words to say to him either. Perhaps she would at lunch tomorrow. Lunch. The thought sent her insides twisting. She still didn't know if accepting lunch with him had been a good idea. What she did know was that she had to be disappointing Micah. Kat slid into her seat and rested her head on the steering wheel for a moment. What was she going to do? I need help, she whispered. With Jordan gone and the suspension over her head, her job felt more impossible than ever. Have faith. The words were not so much audible as felt in her bones, and while they would normally give comfort, today they felt empty. She wanted to have faith, but nothing she was doing seemed to be making a difference. Kat picked up her cell and dialed Patrick. Hey, you okay if I bring dinner and eat with you guys? I don't want to be alone this evening. She bit the inside of her lip as she waited for his response. Though she doubted he would say no, the thought of the possibility of spending the evening in her empty apartment churned her stomach, even more than her upcoming lunch date. The smile was evident in his voice when he answered. Sounds good. Maddie would love to see you. Kat smiled as she started the car. Everything else might be going sideways, but at least she had Patrick and Maddie. So you're telling me that you get visions of people's sins? Jordan cringed at the tone of Jeremy's voice. I know it sounds crazy, but it isn't always sins. Sometimes I get words I'm supposed to say to people to help them feel better. Jeremy smiled and placed a hand on her arm. Immediately, heat spread throughout her body from his touch. I don't think you're crazy. She looked up at him. How could he not think she was crazy when she sometimes thought she was? You don't? His smile widened and light shone from his eyes. Jordan, do you not find our meetings to be fortuitous? She paused. She had been thinking that very thing when she got his text message. The odds of them meeting once were high, but the odds of them returning to Texas on the same flight were pretty astronomical. What are you saying? I'm saying that our meetings have not been by accident. They have been planned. Planned? But how? Jordan should be terrified at this point. His words sounded an awful lot like a stalker's words. But she didn't feel afraid, only curious. The light seemed to radiate from every inch of his face. Because I'm an angel, Jordan. Your angel. Final call for United Flight 762. Jordan barely heard the announcement as she stared at Jeremy. An angel? On one hand, it made perfect sense, but on the other, he didn't look like an angel. Come on, that was our call. He stood and pulled her to her feet beside him. We better get on the plane before we miss our flight. I can see you have a lot of questions, but we'll have plenty of time to talk. Talk? How was she supposed to talk to him after that bombshell? She let him lead her to the boarding door, but she had no idea what she was supposed to say to him now.